Not so long ago, I released a plugin for Godot called TerraBrush, and this plugin allows you to create small terrain, for example like this, and you can paint it, add foliage, or even scatter objects on the scene. I created this plugin for my own use first for my game, and I realized at some point that it could help others, so I was really happy to release it. The thing is, in my case, I didn't need to have a lot of performance boosts because my maps are pretty small, and the reason for that is that my game is something like a multiplayer arena shooter. But while using it, people started to realize that having bigger maps started to be difficult to play with the system. Let's have a look at why is that. Let's create a small maps here, a 256 for example. Everything was fine. Let's look at the wireframe, and well, that's probably a decent number of vertices. But let's create now a bigger terrain. For example, a 248 meters here. Right away we start to notice that it takes a long time just to create the terrain inside of the editor. Well, at some point we finally have the terrain, but let's take a look at the vertices. Well, this is the same algorithm as before, so obviously it doesn't change. This is just a plane being subdivided. So here we have an insane amount of vertices for the terrain here. If we look at the primitives here from Godot, well, this is a huge number for a terrain that has nothing. And imagine we have this map, you probably just don't care about the vertices being rendered at this point here, or at least you don't need a lot of details. So I started to look online for solutions, and I found CLIPMAPs, which basically means that you subdivide your terrain in such a way that part of the terrain that are closer to the player have more vertices, and points that are far from the player have less vertices. Just like here, close to the point of view, you start for example with the 1 meter wide square, and then on the next level you multiply it by 2. You can do this afterwards on the next level as well, and you can go on forever, I guess. So to make sure I understood, I started to do some experiment with Blender. The cool thing with CLIPMAPs is that this is an easy enough algorithm to understand and to implement, in my opinion. Now that I understood, I created this algorithm in Godot for my plugin, and let's create a small terrain again. Let's see how it behaves now with the wireframe. You can see that in the center nothing has changed. We still have our 1 meter wide square for the terrain, but let's zoom out a little bit. Let's assume our point of view is in the bottom right corner, and this is cool, but on the next level we start to see that our square gets bigger, and this is what happens for every level that we created. Okay, let's try a bigger terrain now, a 248 again. Right away we can notice that this is way faster than before, and the amount of primitives, wow, that's way better now. This is the same size for the terrain, but with less vertices. Awesome! The cool thing with that is that you can play with the settings. For example, in this case, you will have more levels, but every levels will have less space between each other. Let's have a look at the number of primitives in this case. Oh wow, I mean this is really low for the size of the terrain we have compared to before. Obviously in this case it means that the player will start to notice low details terrains really close to him. It really depends on what you need. We still have an issue though with the clip map. Let's say we have this terrain. What is this? Let's have a closer look. Yeah, it really seems like we have a hole in the terrain, but what's happening? Let's have a look at the wireframe. Oh yeah, there is definitely a gap between the regions, right? And it seems to happen only when we switch levels, right? So what's happening exactly? Let's get back to the hole, and I'm gonna try to explain it to you. Basically what happens right now is that we have the previous level that has more vertices than the next one, so it can play a little bit better with the 8 to 58 map, but the next one doesn't have this extra vertices, so it's less precise. I'm gonna recreate this situation in Blender so I can explain to you the solution to it. Okay, cool, we have our terrain here, and I'm gonna take the 2 vertices of the next level and I'm gonna do the average of both, and the one in the middle will then decrease or increase to fit this average number, and then it should fit almost perfectly. Hey, we should be able to add this to our algorithm, right? Let's have a look at what happens when we enable it in Godot. This is calculated in the shader. Wow, that works. Alright, we have now an implementation of a clip map inside of TerraBrush. I am really happy about it. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you can now create huge terrain in TerraBrush, but at least it will help a little bit. There are other optimization I could do and I might do in the future, for example, include the patches or the regions or whatever you call install it. But for today, this is what I had to show you. I've done a bunch of other optimization in this version. Make sure you try it and let me know if you like it or not. Alright folks, we're gonna see each other on the next one.